The Synthesis Academy has been around for a while. It works internally and externally and has grown and morphed into something really, really special. Joining me today is Elmarie Grant. She's head of people at Synthesis, but in fact has been leading the Academy for some time. I'm Howard Feldman. This is Synthesis TV.
This is Synthesis TV, keeping you on the edge of technology and business.
Elmarie, nice to chat to you. How are you?
Very well. Thanks for having me.
So first of all, let's just start there. You've morphed a little bit from being head of the academy into people. How did that evolve?
I've always had an HR focus in my career, with a little bit of a passion and love for learning and development in particular. And so when I joined Synthesis, I headed up the academy and in fact started it here so that we could look after our own people.
Right.
I think through time, the role has kind of grown and emerged into something that is more generally HR focused.
Right.
And so while the academy will always be close to my heart, I now look after the broader HR function here at Synthesis.
Okay, so let's talk about what the academy is. Is it an internal focus or is it an external focus?
It started out as an internal focus, helping our own employees get up to date with their skills, stay at the forefront of new technology, continuously learning and building their own growth and development at Synthesis. But what we realized earlier on was that in creating our own learning programs, our customers and clients very often had the same knowledge gaps that we did. And so it became quite clear that we had a service to offer in the learning and development space.
Right, so it starts internally, but actually it's the same problems and the same challenges are being faced by clients. What are those challenges?
I think most of the challenges are around new technology and how we absorb those into new organizations and how we understand how they can actually bring us business value. While technology by itself is interesting and exciting, what really makes it useful is if we can use it to solve business problems. And so understanding new technology and where it can take us is really the key piece that is often missing.
It's fascinating because isn't it almost to some extent like those of us that'll buy a new piece of equipment but not bother to read the manual. We'll kind of figure it out, which means we know about 20% of its capability rather than actually understanding what we can really do with it.
Exactly. And I think it's fine if you have a new phone or a new piece of tech, but if you're really looking after a large organization's data center or after particular workloads in production, then it becomes a very different story. And you really do want competent people to help you look after those things.
And you're leaving value on the table.
Correct.
Right. So that starts with equipping our own people to understand the magnitude of what they are doing and building, but it means also being able to put that across to clients. Are people supportive of time needed and money needed for training?
The training landscape has changed significantly during the global pandemic. We kind of went from face-to-face learning to completely online learning, and everything had to be online learning, to this idea of on-demand learning, which is not led by an instructor, but is kind of online learning videos and content that people can consume in that way, to this idea of bite-sized contents that are 10 minutes or less that people can consume as and when on whichever device they have. Now, all of these methodologies have their benefits, but some of them have severe and significant downsides as well. And what we're actually seeing is a swing back into instructor-led training.
That's interesting.
Part of the advantage of that is that we can clarify what we don't understand. There's someone who can answer our questions, which is very often lacking in self-paced learning or in on-demand videos. So there's something around being able to say, but in my context, this particular piece of theory works differently. Can you help me understand why and how? And again, I think when we want to build real skill and competence, it's not just about people looking at a screen and hopefully absorbing some of it. It's kind of talking to them and helping them entrench what it really means within the context of their particular organization or of their particular learning journey.
Pierre de Villiers is a technical account manager at Synthesis Software, and he sees and has seen on the ground the need for training and perhaps what happens if there isn't. So Elmarie Grant, when I chatted to her, also mentioned just in time. What strikes me is that although we say just in time, from a chronological perspective, it also kind of means just enough, doesn't it? Because if you are training people just in time, it means you're giving them just the amount that they need in order to function.
Exactly.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you say, that just in time is you're essentially trying to meet a deadline and show that you've got enough skill just to get that issue over the line.
So it actually means just enough as well.
Just enough, absolutely. And I think one of the issues around doing that just-in-time approach is perhaps you lose focus of the bigger picture. Because say now you run into a problem with...
And the potential.
Absolutely. So customers are obviously spending a lot of money in building out new technology solutions. You want to make sure that those teams have got the capability not just for the solution, but to help evolve it to the next level. So just in time, where it might be a bit of a band-aid for the issue right now, is definitely not a good long-term solution.
It's interesting, and it's apt, because I'll find I could be listening to a podcast about something and it gets to a part that I'm not really understanding. All that happens is I start thinking about something else until it hooks me back into something, if it does, that I actually can relate to. So what's happened is there's a whole chunk of information I haven't absorbed because I can't understand it, and there's nobody there to say, hold on a minute, I'm just not getting this. How does this tie into my business or what I want to do?
Exactly. There's great wastage in training courses, I think in general, because of that, because a portion of what you're learning is not going to apply to you. But if we can bridge that gap, it actually makes a big difference. I do also just want to say that there's no such thing as wasted learning. So even if you're listening to the podcast and you're only picking up 20%, right?
Better. Yeah.
Maybe that 20% is a significant
Yes.
20% that you're going to
Yes.
apply at some other time. And so even those little bite-sized nuggets that we pick up along the way are often instrumental in kind of triggering our curiosity and going, let me go and read more about this, or let me go and look at this again, or I didn't understand this. Is there something I'm missing?
And it can't give anybody the depth, right?
That's right, yeah.
In other words, it can't give them the ability to solve the problem, therefore independence, really, which is what you want to achieve. Synthesis doesn't want to necessarily hang around. I mean, they can and they'll be there, but if a customer is empowered, enabled, then it's so much better for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also what happens when, say, developers are so focused on getting a solution across the line, there's very little time for them to actually build out their other soft skills. Because these days we don't just keep developers in a cupboard and slide a pizza box underneath and hope that they
I heard that
hope that they're
suggestion
happy.
being made, but it was vetoed by head of people apparently.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea. Probably a good idea. So I think a lot of the time the focus is just on this technology, but what about that individual? What's that individual's learning journey? And outside of the technical, you have to learn these days to be able to speak to different audiences. You have to be able to really articulate both the technical and the business value. So if you have that just-in-time approach, are you really getting all those sort of collateral bits of education that you need? And the answer is probably no.
So at which stage do we offer customers training? Is it throughout a development phase, or is it something that we would offer as an add-on afterwards?
So I think both can be true. I think in an ideal world, we want to be there right from the beginning to say, when we are developing a solution, let's ideate with you. What can the solution do? What does the business need and the business value? And then take it through from there and say, okay, what does the technical team or your development team need in order to help us build and help implement a particular piece of work? And where we are migrating workloads, what does that mean for the people on the ground who are actually going to have to support this after we've built and developed the solution? So there's really kind of this thread that goes all the way through it. Very often it happens that upfront clients will say, no, we think our teams are fine, we've got the skills we need, which is also great. And then after the fact, they might come and knock on our door and say, there is a piece of missing knowledge here. Can you please help? In which case, we're very happy to do so. But I think for us, the key has always been that we work with our customers and clients, so we don't do public training. We really very much want to focus on the people we already have relationships with and whose environments we understand, whose technical and business environments are clear to us and where we can really add value.
Ideally, yes. I think as part of the technical account management position, one of the things that we really want to build is trust, right, from day one. And if you lose that ability to have training as part of a normal conversation, to have it normalized, then it's going to be a struggle. It's really going to be something that you have to keep driving home, and especially if you have to, after the initialization of a project, now start selling the idea of how important training is. I think you're going to run into a couple of issues, yeah.
So what's the dream, not for the academy, but for customers of the academy?
I think for me, the dream is that anytime somebody works with or develops a product with synthesis or a service with synthesis, that there will be some kind of learning embedded in that, so that we really are hitting those skills gap very, very early on.
Equipping.
Correct.
Yeah.
And not just that, but also work with all levels throughout the organization. So you kind of can catch people when they are very junior and kind of still building their skills, all the way through to people who are able to think creatively about how and where they're going to apply the technology within their organizations. And we kind of want to be there with them to support and help them through it.
What's the general attitude?
So fortunately, I think, again, being in the tech sector, being in enterprise, there is already a lot of focus on people development, people journeys, businesses understanding that it is a critical part of their business to be on the bleeding edge of technology. The reception that I see a lot of the time, if I'm fortunate enough to be in a greenfield project where we are beginning to do an assessment of where that customer is, it's much easier to have that conversation to say, this is perhaps where you have skills gaps, this is how synthesis can help, and start implementing those ideas.
What does synthesis offer externally for clients?
So our niche focus initially was around cloud and cloud services and understanding what cloud can do for a business. We realized early on that while your technology teams may have a good understanding of the tech, very often the executive level was really struggling with articulating what the business value was going to be.
Yeah.
And so we were there to kind of connect the dots for them and help them articulate the business value, help them build a good business plan, how to understand total cost of ownership, and all of these kind of methodologies and jargons that otherwise would have been a little over their head. But it grew into something bigger than that, and we very often or very quickly realized that there's additional skills that sit outside of the traditional cloud space that people also have a need for. And so we started building some course material around that. We also realized that actually we need to have a cradle to grave approach around our learning. We can't just do one learning intervention, plump it down and hope that people are going to be competent after that. We actually had to start kind of by building the foundations and then grow an individual's skill as we went through a whole program or a journey around what they could understand. And of course, you kind of start small and then you grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and people can either become generalists or they can specialize in a particular area. And we wanted to cover all of that with the different learning interventions that we offered.
I imagine, though, that telling a company that they might have skills gap isn't always easy.
Absolutely. But I do think, on the other hand, companies are very aware that skills gaps exist because
we're not born with this knowledge.
Absolutely, and as a country, we have there's a real demand for security experts. I mean, AI, ML is now a hot topic again. I think because it's been made public and people have access to it, doesn't necessarily mean that they understand the potential of it. So I think that's part of it, right? Is we have all this information, but we can learn it, but do we actually learn how to implement it and how to use it in conversations and take those conversations to the right places?
It's really an exciting space, isn't it? Because we are upskilling people, growing people, and that must be very rewarding for you.
Absolutely. It's one of the areas I'm quite passionate about. I think in many of my roles and previous employment roles, I've always been really comfortable with learning difficult topics and breaking it down for people that have just entered the company, juniors, graduates, to spend time with not only passing on technical knowledge, but watching that individual grow from strength to strength is really rewarding.
Amazing. So what do people do if they are interested in training? How do they get hold of us? What do they do about it?
So I think Elmarie's already said and done a really good job in providing so many internal methods and platforms and channels. I think one of the key bits is to help identify these individuals that are hungry to learn. And I think in Synthesis, fortunately, we have quite a large group of people that are hungry to learn. I think the areas we need to assist them in is to make sure that the content that they're absorbing or focusing on is really relevant not only to their role, but also their future plans. Where do they want to go? And I think part of my role in the upcoming next few months is to really help drive those internal opportunities and really help rebuild a lot of these channels that they can tap into and get themselves going.
An observation I made during COVID was when everybody was stuck at home, we started off having these social evenings, quizzes and get-togethers, and they were great. But there came a time that there was a bit of a drop-off. And what we found was that when we brought somebody in to teach, even if it was about the most inane topic, not even inane, just you wouldn't think that people would love this, there we found people were there again. So there seems to be an inherent innate need and attraction to learning, and I believe that was where Synthesis masterclasses, for example, came from. Is that part of a specific to a Synthesis culture, or is there something that you see wherever you go?
I think at Synthesis we've definitely deliberately built a culture that focuses on learning and on continuous learning, but I'm not sure it's limited to just what we do. I think people in general are curious. And in fact, I think it's one of the better human traits is to be curious about the world around us. What we've also found is that when you give people information that is not necessarily just focused on the work that they are doing or the thing that they are doing right in front of them, which is what a lot of just-in-time learning does, we're actually opening up not just their curiosity but their creativity.
Very interesting.
And so I think people are wanting to kind of know all these different and interesting things because it actually keeps their brains plastic and helps them be creative by bringing all these bits and pieces together. And so I think it's really important that when we offer learning to our employees, that it's not just focused on the stuff that they're doing every day, but that we're really opening up a whole world of learning around peripheral information, and maybe even something that isn't related to their work at all, to kind of
I
help
remember you
get
ran
that
a class
curiosity.
on bird watching.
Yes, we did.
I thought,
all
nah,
the things.
no one's going to come to that, and it was packed.
It was packed, right? Because people are curious.
Yeah.
And very often, when you give people a piece of information, they'll go, "Oh, I didn't know that. Let me look at it." But for them to go and find it is much harder
Yeah,
work. So kind
yeah.
of putting it out there and giving people the opportunity to interact with it is very often very successful.
And we'll take them along that journey. Elmarie Grant, a very, very ambitious wish list indeed, but an awesome one. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us.
Thanks for chatting.
If you are interested in finding out more, why don't you just send us an email? You can send an email to the academy@synthesis.co.za, or just drop us a comment below and we'll get hold of you. I'm Howard Feldman. This has been an episode of Synthesis TV.